Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can everyone hear me? Can you please let me know in the chat, inshallah, before we begin, just making sure that the mic is working properly. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل يا رب العالمين. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم: من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له طريقا إلى الجنة. Alhamdulillah, today inshallah ta'ala we'll be starting the chapter of loans. And just to summarize what we did last week, alhamdulillah, we covered the chapter of as-salam. And just to quickly recap what we did, we discussed the definition of as-salam and the different conditions of as-salam and why as-salam, or the salam contract, or the contract of advance payment, what are some wisdoms in the Sharia for them. And to recap, a salam contract, as the scholars have defined, is a contract for a commodity based on description. So you're selling something by description. So you're basically telling someone what you're selling them. Maybe you have a write-up on the internet, some words, or you have a picture, but you're not selling them if you don't have the item physically in front of you, what you will be selling them. Rather, you are selling them something based upon you telling them what you will sell, based upon a description. And in essence, you are selling, you are collecting the money up front, and you will be delivering the items at a later time. That is a summary of a salam contract. And we mentioned the different shurut and the evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah. And we mentioned from the evidences is from Sahih al-Bukhari, where the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim would do the salam contract, and they would sell things 2 or 3 years in advance, and this is mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari. So we have some clear evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah for the salam contract. We also mentioned, we went into extensive details about the conditions, what items you can sell, what you cannot sell, and inshallah you can refer to that video, which is number 8. You can refer to that lesson for more details of the salam contract. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be covering loans. And if we have time, we'll also cover the chapter after loans, which is al-rahin. Let me get these slides ready. Okay. And if there's any technical difficulties, please let me know in the WhatsApp chat, inshallah, as I won't be able to see the YouTube chat since I have this slideshow on. When I have the slideshow on, it takes over the entire screen. So if there's any sort of technical difficulties, please let me know in the WhatsApp group. I will be looking on there, inshallah ta'ala. So, Bab al-Qard, or the chapter of loans. The scholars define loans as هو إعطاء مال لمن ينتفع به ويرد بدله. The scholars define loans as giving someone money or giving someone wealth or property or some sort of commodity to someone that will benefit from it. So he will consume it, he will use it, and then he will return its equal or its substitute or its value. And it's very important that we understand the correct definition of a loan. And a loan is something that, or a qard in Islam is something that you give someone and you expect them to give you its substitute or its equal. So when you give someone $5,000, you don't expect them to give you that exact $5,000 back again after 1 year. What you expect is them to use that money, benefit from it, go on with their life, whatever they need it for, and then they will work for another $5,000 or they will get $5,000 from some other source and they will give it to you. Similarly, for example, a person, and this used to happen in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and we actually have an incident of this, is the Prophet ﷺ, he borrowed a camel from someone. And he borrowed this camel, either he would use it for eating or for riding or whatever they would need to use it for. And then, not borrowed, rather he took a camel as a loan. So he did not borrow it, rather he took it as a loan from someone and he returned its equal or its value. So he returned another camel which was equal to the camel that he borrowed or that he loaned. And it's very important that we understand the difference between a loan and borrowing something. When you're borrowing something, you're returning the same exact item. So you ask your friend to borrow his car for 1 day, you take his car, you use it, and then you give it back to him, right? It's not the same as when you're taking a loan or a qard, where you ask someone to, for example, you ask someone to loan you some money, and you give him back, the same amount, but it will be different coins or different money. It's not the same exact money that you took from him. So that's the difference between, or that's the definition of a loan. Now, what's the ruling of taking loans in Islam? What is the ruling for taking loans? So in Islam, for the one giving the loan, so if someone asks you for a loan, then it is mustahab, it is recommended for you to give your brother or sister a loan. If they ask you, they come and they say, look, I'm going through some financial difficulties, I really need this loan, or whatever the reason is, maybe they need it for business purposes or they need it for personal purposes, whatever the reason is. If someone asks you for a loan and you have the ability to give it to them, and of course, you know that, or you have غلبة الظن, you have, you're certain, or you're almost certain that they would have the ability to give it back to you, then it is mustahab for you to give them a loan. It is recommended in Islam. Now, in terms of the one taking the loan, what is the ruling for him? So the one taking the loan, it is mubah. It is permissible for a person to ask for a loan if he needs it. And the reason the scholars say it is mubah and it's not makruh, it's not something that's disliked, is because the Prophet ﷺ is reported in Sunan al-Nasa'i that the Prophet, is reported in Sahih Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ, he took a loan. And in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Abdur-Rahman, where the Prophet ﷺ, he took a loan from a man, and the loan that he took was a young camel. So he took a young camel that was below the age of 6 years old. And when it came time to pay back the loan, the camels of a sadaqah were brought to the Prophet ﷺ, and he wanted to give back the camel to that person that he took the loan from. So he ordered Abu Rafi' radiallahu an to return this person's loan to him, to return this camel to him, right? To return, obviously, not the same exact camel, but a substitute, one of the camels that they got from the camels of a sadaqah. And Abu Rafi' came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I did not find any camel that was the same type that you gave him. I found a camel that was older in age. So you gave him a camel he gave you a camel that was below 6 years old, but we only have camels that are above the age of 6. So they're better camels. I can't find a camel that is, at that same level, at that same value. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, أعطيه إياه إن خيار الناس أحسنهم قضاءً. The Prophet ﷺ said, give it to him, for indeed the best of you, or the best of people, are those who are best in paying off their debt. So, in this case, the Prophet ﷺ, he returned something which was ahsan. It was better than what he got. And this is one of the ahadith that the scholars also take, that if you borrow something from someone, if you borrow some money, for example, $5,000, and when you're returning it to him, you can give him some extra, if you want to give him another $100 or $200 as a thank you, as a gift from your own self, not him stipulating that, but if you want to give it to him as a gift after the loan, or when you give back the loan, then you are allowed to do that, because the Prophet ﷺ, or because of this incident which was narrated in Sahih Muslim. Now, loans versus borrowing, or qard and ariya. So in Islam, we have two concepts, and Islam differentiates between these two concepts. Number one, or the first one, is a loan, which we just discussed, a qard. And we discussed the definition of a qard. And here we have the example that Muhammad takes $5,000 from Zayd as a loan, and he will return it after 1 year. This is a qard, or it's a loan. An ariya, or a borrowing, is defined in the Sharia as a loan, or you giving someone something for use and then returning that same exact item back. So, for example, Ammar borrows a lawnmower from Suhaib. So Ammar, he borrows a lawnmower from his neighbor Suhaib, and he returns it back after 2 days. So in this case, we will call this borrowing or lending. We would not call it a qard or a loan. And in the English language, we may interchange between these two words. So it's very important that we understand the intent when differentiating, or when giving something to someone. Is it a loan? Are you lending them as a qard, where you don't want that exact item back, but you want its substitute? So, for example, you lend someone 1 ounce of gold, right? The intent is the value or the wealth that the person will get from that. He will go and he will sell that gold, and he'll benefit from it, right? And later on, after 1-2 years, whenever he needs to give it back to you, he'll return 1 ounce of gold back to you, right? That is perfectly fine. If the intent was borrowing, for example, where you are lending someone your jewelry, right? And this is the same thing. It's gold, but you're lending someone jewelry, for example, necklaces or a ring or whatever the case may be, because she needs to wear it for to go out to a wedding, for example, or they're getting married. And this is something that would happen back in the days where one village or a group of people would own some jewelry. They would own jewelry, or there would be one person that owns jewelry, and people would borrow the jewelry from someone when they have an occasion like a wedding to go to, right? So the intent here would be borrowing it and returning that same ayn, that same exact particular item, back to the person. And as we have, as the fuqaha have mentioned in Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya, in the principles of fiqh, the rule, or the general rule, is al-ibratu bil-maqasidi wal-ma'ani la bil-alfadhi wal-mabani. So the reality of things are by its intent and purposes and meanings, not by the words or its form. So what this principle means is that when you make a contract, when you are if you're doing any sort of contract or any sort of ta'amul, any sort of dealings with someone, then the reality of that dealing or that contract is not by the words that you say. For example, so a person can say, I want to borrow some salt from you. For example, you need salt to cook with. You realize that you don't have any salt. What do? You go to your neighbor, right? This is what people would do generally back, in the days. They would go to their neighbor, they would borrow some salt. They would say, can I borrow some salt, right? And in reality, they're not borrowing salt and they're going to give back that same exact salt. What would they do? Either they would they're asking for the salt, and they just want some salt for free, right? A little bit of salt, and this is something that they would do. Or they would, for example, they would say, "Can I borrow some salt?" And they would borrow a box of salt, for example, or a container, and they would return that container filled back with salt to the neighbor, right? Giving someone, giving them not the exact same item, but they're giving them a substitute, right? But they're using the word borrow here. So what is the hukum? What do we judge by? So the fuqaha have said that al-ibratu bil-maqasidi wal-ma'ani. So the ruling, or the ruling on that contract will be by the intent and the meaning. So what was meant by this contract? When the person said, I want to borrow some salt, what does he really mean? He really means that he wants a loan of some salt, and he'll give you back some salt, but he obviously is not going to give you back the same exact salt. He's not going to return the salt to you. Rather, he will give you some salt when he buys salt later on, next week or the week after, right? So when we are determining, and this is very important, this principle is very important when there are disputes, and there could be, someone could interpret the contract to mean something, and another person can interpret that phrase or that sentence or that those words that he says to mean something else. What do we go back by? We go back to the meaning and the intent that the person had when he was making that contract or when he was saying that phrase. So it always goes back to the intent and not by the words that are said in a contract. So for example, a person can say that I'm going to sell you my phone and I'll charge you 10% interest if you buy it or if you pay me after 1 year. So the phone is valued at $1,000, but I'll charge you 10%, and obviously 10% of $1,000, it's $100, right? So I'll charge you 10% interest. In reality, it's not interest. He's just charging you a higher amount. So you buy that phone for, and you decide to pay it after 1 year, you'll be paying $1,100. You already know the price, right? Him using the word interest doesn't make the contract haram, right? That's why it always goes back to the intent. And a person can, on the flip side, a person can say that, we're selling you a house, and we're giving you a loan, and we just want, a 5% profit off of this loan that we're giving you, right? He may say the word profit, but what is his intent? His intent is interest, obviously, because you cannot take more, you cannot profit off money, right? If you're lending someone money, you're not allowed to profit off that. Any profit would be considered interest. So even if a person doesn't use interest in their contract, rather he uses some other word that's halal, what's the intent? The intent is interest, and therefore it is judged by what is intended, not what is said in the contract or what was said in the phrase when making the deal. So that this is a very important concept. Some other matters related to loans. So what items are allowed to be loaned? So what are we allowed to lend people? What are some items that are permissible to lend? The scholars, they've mentioned that any item that is permissible to sell is permissible to loan. So for example, an item that you're not allowed to sell is you're not allowed to sell dead meat, right? Meat that has been, or an animal that has been killed, mayta, for example, it's been killed and it has not been slaughtered according to the Sharia, then you're not allowed to sell that. So in So therefore, you're not allowed to loan that as well. So if you have for example, one of your animals died without slaughtering it the Islamic Sharia way, you own that animal, but you're not allowed to sell. You're not allowed to sell that animal, and similarly, you're not allowed to lend that animal to anyone. Another example would be a dog, for example. You're not allowed to loan a dog because you're not allowed to sell a dog. Anything, other examples are anything impure, anything that is najasa, you are not allowed to sell. So therefore, you are not allowed to lend someone or give someone as a loan. How do you repay a loan? So when we're talking about loans, there are two types of categories here when we talk about things that are being loaned. Number one, things that are mithliyat, so things that the scholars have considered as mithliyat, or things that they are similar. So they are a physical thing. For example, it is something tangible, and it's something where there are similar things to it. For example, a sheep or a camel, right? You go find another camel that's the same age. You find another sheep that's the same age, the same type of specifications as you took, and you repay with that animal or with that sheep or with that camel. Now, when we're talking about the second type, which is things that are intended for value, for example, money. When you loan money, or when you're taking money as a loan, the intent is the value of that. Similarly for gold, when you're lending gold, if you lend gold or you lend some sort of precious metal, bullion, then the intent is the value of it. So what do you repay? You repay its value. So you can repay by the actual gold itself, or you can even repay by money, whatever you agree upon with the person that you have taken the loan from. Can you loan a benefit? So can a manfa'a be before we go to can you loan a benefit, a few other points. Loans must not stipulate a benefit or an increase when repaying. So as we've discussed before, كل قرض جرى نفعا فهو ربا. Any type of loan that generates a benefit, فهو ربا, then it is riba. So when you're lending someone something, you cannot stipulate any sort of benefit or increase when he repays you. So there cannot be a stipulated benefit in the contract. So no stipulated benefit in the contract. However, if the person from himself wants to give you some sort of extra thank you gift, or he wants to give you something extra, then that's from himself, and that is allowed. However, stipulating that in the contract, then that is impermissible, and that is considered riba. Also, the one that has returned the loan can gift, we mentioned that. The one that has returned the loan can give a gift or an extra amount after or during when he gives back the loan. Now, another mas'ala which scholars talk about is gifting. When you borrow something from someone, are you allowed to give them a gift before repaying the loan? And the scholars have said that it is haram for a person to give a gift to the person that he borrowed money from before repaying the loan, except if there was a gift giving before that, prior to that. So if, for example, you borrow some money from your friend, you borrow $1,000 from your friend, and before, you would send food to his family, he would send food to you, your family and his family would engage in gift giving, and you borrow money from him because you need money, and you want to give him a gift because this is your normal tradition. You don't have to stop this because of this rule. If you have been doing that prior to the loan, then you're allowed to continue giving gifts to that brother or that sister that you have been engaged with it in the past. However, if you have never given him a gift before and you just borrowed money and now you want to give him a gift, then this is something which is not permitted. And the reason is because this is an extra benefit. The only reason you're giving him a gift is because he's given you this loan for this money, right? If you want to give him a gift, you can give him after you've repaid the entire loan. Can you loan a benefit? So can a manfa'a be loaned? So this mas'ala, the scholars have اختلف العلماء, the scholars have differed in this mas'ala. And we mentioned, for those that have forgotten, what is a manfa'a? A manfa'a, or a benefit in Islam, is something which is not necessarily a tangible item that you're selling. Rather, it's a benefit. It is, for example, renting a place would be considered a benefit. You are not, when you pay rent, you're paying a rent, you're paying money, and what do you get in return? You get to live in an apartment for a specific time, right? So you pay $1,000 and you're allowed to live in this apartment or this house for 1 month, for example. So are we allowed to exchange? Are we allowed to loan a benefit? And the scholars differ. However, Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, has stated that it is permissible to loan a benefit, just as it is permissible to sell a benefit. So just as it's permissible to sell a benefit, just exactly how you can sell, you can rent out an apartment, you can sell that benefit. You're selling the benefit of staying in that apartment for 1 month. You can loan a benefit to someone. And an example for this would be like, you ask your neighbor today for help to on your farm. You have a farm and you need help with reaping your vegetables or your crops. So you ask your neighbor for help today, and you tell him that you help me today, and tomorrow I will help you with your farm. So this is something which is permissible. You're asking him for a benefit. He's giving you that benefit, that work, that labor, and you will give him the same benefit that he's given you the next day. So this is something which is fine, and it is permissible according to Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, interesting facts about Canada. When talking about loans and interest, subhanAllah, I found this very interesting, that up to 1992, the federal government of Canada accumulated a debt of $423 billion. And in reality, the debt that they needed to run their country was only $37 billion. And the remainder, 386, represents the amount that the government has borrowed to service that debt. Rather, or in other words, interest. So subhanAllah, we see the detrimental effects of interest on a loan. And the reason I brought this up was to show that, how the negative effect that interest, riba, has on, an entire nation. We look at the entire nation of Canada, and this has put them into debt for tens of years, maybe even more than that, right? Tens and tens of years, generations. And Allahu A'lam if the country will ever be able to get out of debt and be debt free. And who has to pay this debt? It's citizens, right? Every time a person buys something in Canada or even the United States or many other countries, there's taxes, and it's us that have to suffer because of these, because of the interest and because of these decisions that people in the government make. Subhanallah. And this just shows the the negative effects of interest and how it affects not only you or that person that you're doing that contract with, but how it can affect an entire nation or entire population, or on a wider aspect, the entire world. So that concludes the chapter of Al-Qard, and we will start the chapter of Ar-Rahin. Bab Ar-Rahin. Ar-Rahin in Islam means, or in English, it means security deposits. Al-Rahin means security deposit or a collateral. And the definition that the scholars give is توثق الدين بعين يمكن استيفاؤه أو بعضه منها أو من بعضها. A specified security deposit which can be fully pawned or partially pawned to pay off the entire debt fully or partially. So to pay off the debt fully or partially. So in other words, a rahan is a security deposit. It is a collateral. It is something that you give as a guarantee that you will have some sort of something in case the person you're giving that loan to is not able to repay you. So, for example, you lend your friend $5,000, and you tell your friend is from your haqq. You can ask him, look, I need something to guarantee this $5,000. It's a lot of money, and I'm not sure. Allahu alam, things can happen if you'll be able to pay it back, if you're not be able to pay it back. But I would like something to secure that loan, and he can give you something, either something that is the equivalent of that loan. So he can give you, for example, he has a piece of gold which is worth $5,000, or he has a piece of jewelry which is worth $1,000, or he has some other item which is worth either the entire amount or less or more than the loan. He can give that to you, and you can keep that until he pays back the entire loan. So the ruling for al-rahin, according to the Quran and the Sunnah and the consensus of the scholars, is that it is mubah, or it is permissible. So it is permissible to give or to ask for a rahan according to the Quran, the Sunnah, and ijma'. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ وَلَمْ تَجِدُوا كَاتِبًا فَرِهَانٌ مَقْبُوضَةٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and if you are on a journey and cannot find a scribe, then فَرِهَانٌ, a security deposit, should be taken. And we have the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the mortgage animal, ar-rahnu, and in this word, or in this hadith, the ar-rahnu, where he says mortgage animal, means a rahan, or a security deposit. An animal that is given as a security deposit can be used for riding as long as it is fed, and the milk of the animal can be which is produced from that animal can be drunk according to what a person spends on it. The one who rides the animal or drinks the animal should provide the expenditures. So the Prophet ﷺ here is talking about the rahan, the person that takes a animal for a rahan. So he gives a loan to someone and he takes an animal. You're allowed to milk that animal, and you are allowed to benefit from the animal by riding it, as long as you are maintaining that animal, you are feeding the animal, and you are sheltering it, etc. So you are paying from your own pocket for food and shelter and etc. for that animal. So your payment for that, or your exchange, is that you are allowed to milk the animal, and you are allowed to use it for riding. And this hadith clearly shows that al-rahan was something known in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rulings pertaining to al-rahan. So number one, it is permitted to give a security deposit or a collateral with anything that is permitted to sell. So similarly, like the loan, anything that you're allowed to sell, you're allowed to make it a rahan, or a collateral, or a security deposit. Number two is that it is permitted to give a security deposit of something that you own fully or partially. So for example, you have a partnership with a person in a vehicle, in a car, or in a real estate, in a home, or in a piece of land. So you want to take a loan, for example, of $1 million, or you want to take a loan of $500,000, or whatever the amount is. You don't own that entire property. However, you own a portion of that property. You're allowed to put your portion as a rahan, as a security deposit for the loan. So even if you have a part ownership, you are allowed to put your part ownership of that type of wealth as a rahan, or as a security deposit. Number 3 is, it is permissible to give a collateral as something which is ambiguous, or it has some sort of gharar. In this case, because the intent is not for trade or sale, rather it is for something to further authenticate or protect or secure the contract. So the rahan is an outward type of mechanism which is used to secure the contract. So therefore the scholars, they are not so strict when it comes to describing the item. So as you've learned, when we spoke about selling something, we mentioned that you have to describe that item. The buyer has to know that item inside out. He has to know exactly what that item is, and he has to know all of the different features, especially those features which will make the item more valuable or decrease its value. In terms of a rahan, it does not have to be that specific. For example, you can tell him that, I have a car, and it's a Toyota Corolla 2010 model. It has 100,000 kilometers, for example, and you give him, or even if you didn't even mention the kilometers, you give it to him as a rahan, right? Now, when you're selling that, of course, he would have to know exactly. You would have to know the color. He would have to know if there's any accidents. He would have to know more details about that car. In a rahan, if some of those details are not mentioned, then it is fine, because it doesn't affect the actual contract. What will happen is when at the end when he has to sell that rahan, then he will sell it, and then he will get the money for the rahan to pay off the debt if it comes to that. But however, at this time, there's no sale being actually made, so they're not that strict on the particular details of the rahan. The rahan can be given before the contract, or it can be given with the contract, or it can be given after the contract. So a person can come and say, look, I need to borrow some money from you. I need it tomorrow. I would like to borrow $5,000 from you tomorrow. Look, this is I'm bringing you a car as a rahan, as a security deposit, and he brings the car and he gives it to the person that will be giving him the money tomorrow or the next day. And then the person, of course, he needs to go to the bank, or he needs to get the money, however he needs to do it, and he may take some time. So he gets the money after 1 day or after 2 days, and he gives it to the loaner, the one that is loaning the money from him. So that's an example of how a person can give the rahan first before getting the money, so before the actual contract takes place. Also with the contract, obviously, when you're actually conducting the contract, he can give the rahan at that time, or after the contract has already taken place. So for example, the seller or the person that is loaning the money, he can say that, look, I'll give you this $1,000 now, but come back with me after 1 day or after 2 days. I want something to secure this contract. And the person comes after 1 or 2 days and gives him some sort of security deposit, some sort of collateral to secure that contract. 4 conditions of a rahan. So there are 4 general conditions of a rahan, or of a collateral or a security deposit. Number 1 is it has to be munajjazan. So munajjazan in the Arabic language means it has to take place right away on spot, meaning that a collateral is only considered a collateral once you give it to him, once you transact that item as a collateral. So if I say that I will give you my car next week as a collateral, then at that it is not a collateral. It's not considered a collateral right now when I say those words. It is only considered a collateral once I actually transact and I actually give that item. So if I say, for example, I will give you my car as a collateral next week, and then next week I don't give it to you, you have no right to take the car as a collateral. And if I don't repay you, you can't take that car and sell it, right? It is not considered a collateral. It is only considered a collateral when it is given or transacted on the spot right away. So it has to be munajjazan, take place right away for it to be considered a collateral. Number two is the person giving the collateral needs to be jaiz at-tasarruf. And there is an error on the slides. It should say jaiz at-tasarruf. So a person must have trading competence and according to the Sharia. And we spoke about this extensively. A person needs to be balighun, aqilun, rashidun, hurrun. So he has to be baligh, he has to be over the age of puberty, he has to be aqil, he has to be sane, a sane person. He has to be rashidun, he has to have trading, he has to have trading expertise, or he has to know how to trade. And he has to be hur, he has to be free. And you can refer to the conditions of the first number one or number two, the first one or second video for more details on what jaiz at-tasarruf means. Number three is the person that is giving the rahan has to own the rahan or have authority over the rahan. So, for example, if you're giving a car, then you must own that car, or you must have authority over it. So, for example, the president of the masjid needs money as a loan. So a person says, "Look, I have $500,000, or I have $1,000. I'll give you as a masjid. I'll give it to you guys as a loan." And the president of that masjid or someone in authority of that masjid gives him a photocopy machine, or he gives him something that's valuable that the masjid owns as a collateral. So in this case, the president or the person that is giving that collateral for the loan is not a person that owns that photocopy machine or he owns that item. Rather, he has authority over that item. And number four is the rahan must be known. So you need to know what you're giving generally, but not the specific details as we mentioned above. You need to know generally what it is that you're getting. So you're giving a photocopy machine, you're giving a car, etc. It can't be something that is completely majhul, completely unknown. The collateral is binding only when the person gives the loan or giving the loan, or that takes possession of the collateral. We mentioned that above. Both parties are not allowed to use or dispose of the collateral without the other person's permission. So the scholars, when they talk about a rahan or a security deposit, this security deposit is something which is a shared. It is in like a hanging position. It is in a frozen position, whereas the owner, he partially owns it, as well as the person that he's given that rahan to, he's given that security deposit to, he has a partial ownership or a partial possession of that item. So none of the two are allowed to transact that item. They're not allowed to gift it or sell it or loan that item without the other person's permission. So for example, if you take a collateral for a loan that you're giving, you're not allowed to lend that item to anyone else. So you have a car, for example, you're not allowed to lend that car to anyone else. You're not allowed to even use that car without the permission of the owner. Since both parties, or since you do not have complete ownership of that item. Similarly, the owner is not allowed to sell that item. So the owner is not allowed to sell the item I'm just checking the slides. I see a message in the group about the slides not changing. Are the slides working now? So similarly, the person that owns the collateral, so the person that owns that car, and he's given it as a collateral to someone, he cannot sell that car. So, for example, you give the car to someone, and someone comes and they want to buy that car from you. You cannot sell that car because it is a collateral for someone else or for a loan at that time. Another point to mention is the person that has the collateral with him, that has that rahan with him, he is allowed to benefit from that collateral for the amount that he spends on it. So, for example, if it is an animal and he has to spend food for that animal, then he is allowed to milk it, or he can ride that animal for the amount of money that he puts in or he has to spend, as mentioned in the hadith above that we've previously mentioned. Lastly, or not lastly, but the loan or the collateral is considered an amana. So it is considered an amana or an entrustment, and basically what that means is that when you take a collateral from someone, you are responsible to do everything that you need in order to secure that item. So, for example, if you're taking jewelry, then you need to put it in a place where jewelry is normally put. For example, a safe in your home, or you hide it, right? You don't leave it out. For example, if you're taking a car, then you need to you need to park that car in your driveway, or you need to put it in a safe place, and you don't leave it out on the street so people can damage it or people can, potentially crash into it, etc. So a person generally is not liable for anything that happens to the collateral. So you take a rahan, you take a person's car, you're not liable for anything that happens except if you do a ta'addi or a tafrit. So except if you transgress. So if you transgress, a ta'addi means to transgress by doing something which is not permitted to do with that item. So for example, a person gives you jewelry, right? They give you jewelry, and you have that as a collateral. Now, your daughters are going to a wedding, and they're in need for they're in needs for some jewelry, and you decide to give them that jewelry to go to the wedding to dress up with. That is something which is impermissible. You're not allowed to do that except if you have permission from the owner of that jewelry. So you're not allowed to do that, and that would be considered something a transgression. And if you did do that and something happens to the jewelry, it gets damaged, it gets stolen, it gets lost, then you are responsible for that. Similarly, if you do a tafrit, meaning you do not do something which you are required to do. For example, you put the jewelry, you're required, if you have jewelry, to put it in a safe place. You put it in a drawer, you put it in a safe, you put it up somewhere. You don't leave it out, on your kitchen table, or you leave it out, outside on your porch. You don't leave it out, right, in the public. Now, if you decide to leave it out and something happens, someone steals it, it gets damaged, something happens to the jewelry, then you are responsible because you did a tafrit. Now, however, if something happens, and for example, what is commonly known as acts of God, something by the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happens, you have secured that jewelry as it should be. You put it up in a safe. You had this collateral. You take it, you put it up in a safe, or you put it up in a drawer somewhere. You hide it. You didn't use it. You didn't do anything that you're not supposed to do, and somehow a thief comes and he steals some of that jewelry along with some of your jewelry and some of your wealth, then in that case you are not liable, you're not responsible, because you did the best you could to protect that amana or that collateral. When is the creditor allowed to liquefy his liquefy the collateral? So when are you allowed to, you've taken collateral from someone and you have it. When are you allowed to sell that collateral and take the money, convert it into money? So is it just as soon as the loan is done? Are you allowed to do that, or do you need permission? We will discuss this right now, inshallah. So if the loan is matured and the loan has not been paid, then the loaner may liquefy the collateral if he has permission from the owner. So in order for you to liquefy that asset or that collateral, in order for you to sell that or pawn that item, you need permission from the owner. So you need permission from the owner to sell or to liquefy it and sell it and get money for it. Now, usually in contracts, what they would do is you would take the permission at the beginning of the contract. So you would say that, look, you're giving me this collateral and you give me the permission to sell this item if you do not pay on time. And if he gives you that permission at the beginning of the contract, then you are able to sell it as soon as you ask him for the item. You ask him for the money. He doesn't give it to you. He's lazy on it, or he's not able to pay you. Then you can sell the item right away, and you can benefit from that. If you get more than the amount, then you give him the extra. So if you get you borrowed, for example, $1,000, you sell the car that he gave you, and you get $1,200, and you give him the extra $200. If you sell the car, for example, and you get less, then he owes you the difference. So if you sell the car for $800, then he owes you $200 now. And that is only if he is giving you permission. Now, there may be some cases where he doesn't want to give you permission. So, for example, he has something which has sentimental value, right? He gives you something, for example, he has a ring from his grandmother which has been passed down for generations after generations. The ring may not have, it may be valuable, but the greater value there is that sentimental value, and he doesn't want you to sell that ring. He's giving it to you as a security so that you have a peace of mind, right? So in that case, if he doesn't give you permission, then you are not allowed to sell it. You have to ask him for permission to sell it. So if he doesn't pay you, tell him, look, you've given me this collateral. Can I use it? Can I sell it and take it? Take my loan, my debt, the money that you owe me from this collateral. If he agrees, then alhamdulillah, you sell it and you get whatever money you're able to get from it. If he does not agree, however, to sell the collateral, then you can take him to court, and Islamically, you would take him and the judge would force him to repay the loan. So the judge would force the person to repay the loan. If he cannot pay the loan, then the judge would forces him to sell the collateral and repay the loan. And if he still refuses to sell the collateral, then the judge will issue a decree for the collateral to be sold and the loan to be repaid from the money acquired. If there's any extra money, it will go back to the owner. And if there is any difference, of course, the owner will have to pay. The absent, and lastly, finally, we end off with this one. The absent person is treated like the one who is not able to repay his loan. So, for example, a person, you lend someone $5,000, and the agreement is that they would pay you after 1 year. After 1 year, you try to get a hold of this person, and he is nowhere to be seen. You cannot contact him on Facebook, on any of the social medias, by email. You try calling him, you try calling his relatives. They don't know where he is. No one knows where this person is, right? He's left the country, for example, and he's gone somewhere else. In this case, he is considered like the person that is unable to repay his loan. And if he's given you a collateral, then you can you can you can sell it, or you can liquefy it, uh, as long as you have, or this would be done by the judge. The judge would decree that this person is unable to pay, and he would liquefy the collateral right away. Inshallah ta'ala, next week we'll start with the chapter of Ad-Daman, or the guarantor. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. If there are any questions, please enter them in the chat or in the WhatsApp group, and I will answer them inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillah, looks like there are no questions, so we'll end off here inshallah. Can you share the slide in the group? Yes, Brother Akbar, I will share the slides and the PDFs in the group. Jazakallah khair for reminding me. I will do that. I will try to do that today, inshallah ta'ala. If there are any other questions? There is a question: are you allowed to change the collateral midway in the agreement? So if you've made the collateral, you are not allowed to take it back unless you have permission, from the person you've given the collateral to. So if, for example, you give a person your car, and after 1 month you realize that you need that car, and you ask the person, I need my car. Am I allowed to use it? Can I ask you for to use the car? And he allows you to. Then he is giving up his haqq as the person that has taken the collateral. So once he gives that haqq up, then that's him giving that up, and he has the ultimate right to give it up or not. He can say yes, you can use the car, or he can say no, I need the car as a collateral. So it is up to the person that you've given it. If you want the collateral back, of course you can repay the loan, and after you repay the loan, then you have the right to take back your collateral. So the collateral in some aspect is a type of frozen type of wealth. It's money, or it's wealth that cannot be transacted until certain things happen. And we'll end off with that inshallah. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.